So we're talking about the different halachas, different laws about how do you hold your posture during Shemoneh Esrei. So the way it's mostly read is that it's basically telling you what you have to do, and this is what you should do, and this is the way you should hold your body to represent this construct. That we're trying to represent a certain construct, a certain idea, which you talked about a little bit at length. That is idea of that you are in a state or a stage of consciousness, which is represent the idea of Atzilus, which we said represents a state where there's no longer a sense of creator and creation, which is a duality. It means that I exist, and in my existence, I see the hand of Hashem, I see the presence of Hashem, I sense the presence of Hashem. That's still within the sense of a duality. And then you slip into a higher level of consciousness where, I don't want to say the sensation is because it's a paradoxical. You can't have the sensation because if you're having the sensation, you're out of the experience. But it's like sort of, when you listen to music, this will be like an image of this, and you get completely lost in the music, that you're not observing yourself listening to the music, and that's when you really experience it, right? If you're observing, listening to music and saying, oh, this music is very pleasant and it's doing this to me and that to me, then you're not really experiencing it. The moment you stop being in your head and you just allow yourself to experience it, you become misyached, you become unified with the experience. So Shemoneh Esrei, which is the peak of tefillah, and in other words, that is really what tefillah is. Everything is just a preparation to get to that state, is to get to the place where it's not that I am experiencing Hashem's presence in my life and I sense Hashem's presence in my life, but I'm so one with that reality that it's almost like it's coming through me. That the sensation, we said, would be where a person, again, doesn't feel, because you can't really feel this experience, but when you get out of the experience, you feel like you're just an instrument of Hashem's presence in this world. That you're just here to express the divine presence in this world. Okay, that's like when you get out of the experience, you can recognize it. Like, it's not about me. Who am I? I'm just here to Mekadosh Shem Shemayim. I'm just here to sanctify Hashem's name, which means I'm just here for Hashem's light to shine through in the world through this particular vessel called me. That's the experience of Atzilus. So one way to read all the halachas, all the different laws about how you're supposed to hold the posture of your body, is that it's basically trying to tell you this is what it represents. So therefore, like we spoke about, holding your hands together, so you're not moving. What else did we speak about? We spoke about the hands. We spoke about shaking, not to shake. So you're still. So you're not shocking. You're in a still state, which is that it's representative of the state that you're at. But the truth is, on a deeper level, there's a symbiotic. There's like an interrelationship between body and mind, where not only does the mind affect the body, but by doing things in your body, it loops back into your consciousness. So if you hold yourself in a certain way, this is very popular today. People make a whole living doing this. But like, if you want to, be successful in having a business deal, and you walk in like sloped and this, the guy's gonna think, even though you have the best idea, no one's gonna trust you. But if you walk in like that, you're holding your hands up, you're holding your posture straight up, you'll exude confidence. This is like a whole, technology, how you do this. But there's something very real about it, because not only it doesn't impress other people, that's not really what we're trying to say, is that when you hold yourself in a certain way, it automatically creates the certain consciousness in your mind. So the way you hold your body, the physical posture that you hold yourself, creates that conditioning itself. So it's not just representative. I'm going to daven Shemoneh Esrei, and therefore I'm not going to shake now because that's what I'm doing. No, if you do that, it's going to help you be in that place. Now, it's very important to understand that this cannot be forced, right? You can't force it. So you can begin to say, I'm going to do this now, but if you're in the middle of davening Shemoneh Esrei, and all of a sudden you find yourself shaking, or you find your hands flying, whatever, you're in some ecstatic state and something happens, then that's not an indication of anything, because like we said from Pinson card, so he says that sometimes even if your hands fly above your head, which is something the Sefer Bar says you shouldn't do, that's actually a sign that your tefillah is kabbalah, that your prayers are answered. So the state is reflective. I mean, the posture is reflective of the state that we're at, but also the posture that we do is to affect the state that we're going to want to be. So now we're going to talk about do you say the Shemona Esrei, Yidam Shemona Esrei, with your eyes open or closed? This is the question. So you have a Taz here, that the Taz in Simon Tzadik Aleph and Shulchan Aruch writes that it's on the left column, and the Taz writes that the Zohar V'Eschana, it says in the Zohar, Man Dekoi B'Tzlusa, someone that's standing in a state of davening, Boy Lechusa Reishav Eina Begin Lo Yistakal B'Shchinta, that you have to close your eyes and cover your head. It's on the page. See, it says Taz, Magen David on top, on the left column. On the right page, on the left column. So you have to close your eyes, cover your head. The Lo Yistakal B'Shchinta. This is what it says. You shouldn't look at the Shechina. And then he says, Oitshom, it also says in the Zohar over there in Parshas V'Eschana, Man de Pochich Eina B'Shas Seloisa Maktim Lo Malach HaMavos. These are very harsh words. And the Taz brings this on La Halacha. This is not just the Zohar that's an idea. Taz says that if you open your eyes during Shemona Esrei, you greet the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death. This is very 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 scary. I don't know, whatever. We'll talk about this in a second. But just the reason why angel of death, why it's called the Malach HaMavos, because the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, the Chaf, the Gemara actually says that when it talks about Shmartim, that a person should protect himself, the Gemara says over there that the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death, whatever the Malach HaMavos is, I'm not explaining what this is, because who Malach HaMavos, who Satan, who Yetzirah, it's all part of the same thing. It's one big package. That this Malach HaMavos, this angel of death, it says Mole is Kulei Einayim. His whole body is full of eyes. And and before a person passes on, they open their mouth and a sircha falls down from its mouth, whatever. That's why a mess smells. That's what the Gemara says. But the image of the Malach HaMavos is that he has full of eyes. Okay, that's one image to understand. In the Zohar, in Sabbath Mishpatim, the Zohar speaks about the level of Rachel, which is one level of the Shechina. And it says that the Shechina is called Alumta Shepirta de Les Ba'ena. It's called a maiden, a beautiful maiden, like a young woman, that has no eyes. The Shepirta de Les Ba'ena. That's beautiful, doesn't have eyes. So this is the level of the Shechina. There's a lot of conversation what exactly this Zohar means. The Magid of Mezrich, the Mezrich Magid, in Oira Emes writes, it's said a teaching B'Shem of the Magid, that the idea of this Alupta Shapirta, the Les Be'ena, this idea of not having eyes, he says that there are two types of avodah, two types of service that a person has, and there's someone that is oived, a person big gadol, a person that serves Hashem really with a greatness, a bigness. And the idea of the les la'ena means that they're not observing themselves, that they're not self-aware. So when you're seeing, if you're in experience and you're seeing it, so wait, you can see it, something outside of you, or you could be seeing yourself. So the idea of les ba'ena, the idea of the presence of the Shechina, is that it's the level where there's, in avodah, in terms of a person's madrega, it's talking about that you're not reflective on yourself, that you're not observing yourself. That's the level that we're trying to reach. Which the contrast would be whatever the Malach HaMavos is, whatever this angel is, but would be Mole Einayim, which means that you're always looking. So always looking is, I would say, unfortunately, a lot of people live this way. They're always looking. Either they're looking, to impress other people, or they're looking what other people say about them, or they're even looking to impress themselves to see how they're doing in their own conditioning. So there's some level of klipa, some type of a negative quality where a person is always trying to see, to see what others are thinking or others are looking, or even to self-reflect on their own self. Now, it doesn't mean that a person shouldn't self-reflect. It's just the question is at when, at which point. In Shmoneh Esrei, you're not supposed to do that. When you reach that level, you're not supposed to do that. Now, a person can do a cheshbon nefesh. A person can reflect on their own life. Where am I holding? What am I doing? That's fine. But when you get to a certain point where you're processed into the place of where you're now in the state of Shmoneh Esrei, here you have to be in a place where there's no eyes, that you're no longer looking. On a deeper level, you actually become the eyes of the Shekhinah. You become the eyes through the process of Shmoneh Esrei. Correct. So that's the end. So Sech Zayin is a process where the Shekhinah becomes redeemed. Alumta Shapirta Les Be'ena can also be seen as a Shekhinah in a state in exile, that it's not yet in a full redemptive state. And you, through the process of Shmoneh Esrei, you're the Shekhinah, you're the embodiment of the Shekhinah, we'll see soon. And through the process of the Shekhinah, you, through cleansing your eyes, you're able to eventually be able to see in a correct way. So V'zech Zayin B'shuv Chiltzin is actually not just a tefillah, it's not just a prayer that it should be the state, but when you reach the end of the Shmoneh Esrei, the Sechazena, we start seeing B'shuv Chiltzin Barachmim on the level that we're at. So this is the idea of this Alumta Shapirta, this idea with no eyes. But in general, the idea is to daven with closed eyes, especially comes from the Ari. The Ari Dafke is daven with his eyes closed. But the Magen Avram, in Tzaddik Gimel says that Hakol Lefi Sha'adam Margish Benafshe. Ultimately, you have to know whether you're holding with your eyes open, you're holding with your eyes closed. You have to be conscious of that, which means daven in the state that you're at, even though you want to be there. So if you close your eyes and it doesn't work, and you're not getting to that place, so then sometimes to look in the Siddur would also be appropriate.
Is looking in the Siddur like connecting to the Isis of the Sefer Torah, so you're not really looking at something?
Okay, so we're going to learn this. Unfortunately, I didn't make a copy of this because, but I just want to read you a small Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. The Shekhinah is not self-aware, of course not. Yeah. Correct, of course.
That's not self-aware.
No, of course not. Like this. So the Baal Shem Tov writes like this. This is Chassidus Pasim from the Toldos. I'm reading you very quickly, but the thing is like this. He says, "When Imroya Kshus Besoid Akatnas, if a person sees that they're starting to daven, and they feel they're in a constricted state, they're in a small state, Vein Yochel Lachaven, and they can't have proper intention. What does it mean that they can't have proper intention? Shemes Gamral Machshav Zars, they're having negative thoughts. Azay Yispal Kiltinik Ben Yoimim B'Toich Aksav. Then you should take a daven like a child and read from the Siddur. So let's say you're in a state and you slip out of the state and you want to get back into it. So sometimes it's appropriate to start again looking in the Siddur. Obviously not looking around. That's the whole other conversation. But you're looking in the Siddur, and the Torah says he had moyer al atzmoi, that my Rebbe, the Baal Shem, said on himself that that when he was traveling, it's known that when the Baal Shem was traveling to Eretz Yisrael, he entered into a very big state of constriction, a state of katnus, and now all the godless states, the expansive states, he lost. And he was connected to the Isis, to the letters himself. And then he says like this: when a person davens from what is written, and he connects to the letters, he elevates the level of asiyah. I'm going to explain what this is. Kitevas ksav, the word ksav, this is an original acronym from the Baal Shem, that the letters chaf, taf, beis, ksav, is a Rosh Tevis, is an acronym for what? It's a Rosh Tevis keser, chaf, the keser of Malchus, which is taf. I'll explain what this is. So the keser of Malchus, chaf, taf, is that it's the keser of Malchus, the crown of Malchus. And Beis is Bina. Chaf Taf Reish is Keser Taf, which is Malchus. I know these are just words, and Bina, and he doesn't finish this Torah, but in a few, there's another shtickle in Ben Peres Yosef, which is another say from the what? No, we're gonna finish it. We're gonna finish it. They says that Shoyesh Atfila lekasher din hamalchus, to meskasher, to connect the din of malchus, ulamatek din mishasher bina, and to sweeten them through the idea of bina. So I'll explain you very quickly what this means and understand this. You're in a state of katnus. Katnus means that you're in a constricted state, and and you have machshavas. Your mind is not settled, and you can't be present. So what do? So what you do is, this is a very interesting way of how to mamtik din, to sweeten din. Taf is the final letter of the Aleph base, right? That's pretty simple. Aleph is the first expression of the oir. The first expression of the light is through Aleph. Beis is really two Alephs. We're going to talk about this, Barichas. This is a long time from the Baal Shem. But two is really two ones. Beis is not Beis. Beis is two Alephs. Gimel is three Alephs. Taf is the final version of the multiple possibility of Aleph. What does that mean? That Aleph is one, is unity, is the oneness, is the expression of the light of the oneness in Hashem in the one. Then you have the world of multiplicity, which is Beis, Bereshis Bara, the world of Beis. As the world becomes more dense, the densest form of matter would be the final letter of the Aleph base. Right? If you say that the letters are the building blocks of creation, so what would be the letter that's most connected to the Or? Aleph. The furthest connected to the Or, to the light itself, would be Taf. So, and since it's the building blocks of creation, so something that is created with the letter Taf, it means that it's the most dense matter. Now, if you translate that, so matter would be Malchus, which means the container, the vessel that's being projected. When you, in simple language like this, when you see letters written on a page, before you understand what they mean, the letters on the page, before there's any understanding of what these letters mean, the oisius beli pirush is malchus. This is also from the Talmud in Bamidbar. That oisius, letters without a pirush, is malchus, which means that if I look at a page and I only see the letters on the page and I don't know what they mean. Let's say I'm reading another language. I don't know what the language means, and I see five letters together. I maybe know the alphabet of that language, but I don't understand how to put these words. I don't know what the word means. So to me, what I'm seeing now is just the vessel. If I look at the table, I just see the table. I don't see the oil. I don't see the light of the table. I don't see the mahava mechaya. So when I see oisius, without any havana, without any understanding, what I'm looking at is the kli. I'm just seeing the vessel. And that is the reason why there's katnus. Katnus means a constriction. What's a constriction? A constriction means something that's not allowing it to be revealed. What does it mean when a person says, I'm in a constricted state and have moichin de katnus? Or katnus, whatever a person has in a state of katnus. What does katnus mean? Katnus means when a person is in a constricted state, which I would like to express something, but I don't have the tools to express it. Therefore, I'm in a constricted state. The ultimate constricted state was Kali Solom Mitzrayim, right? Where Golas Adibur, they didn't have even the capacity to say it, even to cry. They weren't able to cry. But that's when a person is so stuck, we'll call it, let's say, so traumatized, that they don't even have words to express their trauma or to even to cry. They're so hurt. God forbid, people that went through really very, very intense trauma can't even cry any longer because there's no outlet, there's no expression. Once you can, once a person can already express it, that's cathartic. That's already part of the healing process because that's the way you're breaking from the state of katnus into a state of godless. So what Baal Shem is saying like this: if a person is in a state of katnus, and they're trying to get to a higher state of godless, right? They're stuck in this constriction and they're trying to get into a more expansive state. So what do you do? So he says very simply, if you're going to look at letters before they have an intention, right? So you look at letters on the page, you're looking at the letters of the page, and you are going to animate the letters through Bina, which means your understanding of what these letters mean. You see Baruch Atah Hashem, and you say, if I don't read these letters, and I don't understand what these letters mean, the letters Baruch Atah Hashem means nothing on the page, right? The only way Baruch Atah Hashem actually becomes something that means something is if it's read. That's when it becomes Baruch Atah Hashem. Otherwise, it's just letters, which means there's ultimate concealment. The moment it becomes read, there's a revealing. So when Sefer Yitzir, for example, speaks about the world being created, b'sefer, 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 b'sipur, different versions. So there's a sefer, which is the author, and then one version of, according to the Gra, one version is b'sefer, b'sefer, and a book and a book. There's an author and a book and a book. That's what the world is created. What does it mean? Hashem is the author of creation, presents a book. The book is yeah. But the book is not revealing anything yet. The book is possibly, if you're going to read the book, then it's going to become a revealing of the book. But if the book is left on its own, then there's a sefer that writes a book, and the sefer is a closed book. It's not read. What does the person do? The person becomes the sefer that's reading the sefer. I'll give you another way of thinking about this. If I speak to you, right? So the letters that I'm speaking, the language that I'm speaking to you is immediately revealing. If you speak the language that I'm speaking, which means that there's an immediate connection between the thought that I have and the word that I'm speaking, and for you to understand it. Which means when the words were given over, they're not given over in concealment. They're given over in a type of revelation. Therefore, when you receive those words, you already understand what I'm saying. But if I wrote those words, right? And it was hard to decipher what the words mean, or before you read them. So then I revealed myself in those words. I gave myself into those words, and there's the sefer and the sefer. But when the person picks up the book, before he starts reading it, it's a concealment. And what happens when the person starts reading it? They animate those letters. So there's an animation now, that now the letters don't say there's Beis Reish Vav Chaf, it actually says Baruch. Which is what the person is actually doing, is they're experiencing an amtakas adin through the process of literally saying the words, by understanding what they're saying. So the Baal Shem is saying like this: if a person finds himself in a godless moichen state, and a person is in which what the Ari is talking about, when a person can daven with alumtich shapir to the less le'ena, you can daven with your closed eyes because you're in the presence of the Shekhinah and you don't have to look. Okay, fine, then you're in that state. But what happens if you break that state, and then you don't feel it? So then, because you're now in a state of katnus. So if you're in a state of katnus, what you're going to do is try to get back to a state of godless. One way is, how do you do this hamtakas adin? How do you do the sweetening of a din? And again, sweetening of the din, what the Baal Shem says, sweetening of the din, the Baal Shem calls this katnus is because he has machshavas zoros, because you have other thoughts that are floating around. That's the katnus. The katnus is machshavas. Then yachol lechaven, a person can have intention. So if you can't mechaven, because you can't have intention, you're not able to hold focus. So what you do is the literal reading of the words on the page, the oisius, that were in a state of katnus, you're following? In a state of constriction before you read them. And now ksav is the keser of the malchus, which is the ksav, is now animated through the koyach habina, which is your understanding. You just gave an animation to the letters. You just created a godless within the text that you're reading. That will have an effect now on your own consciousness. So this is a very, very interesting, because in the Torah Sari, not to get into this conversation again, but generally in the Torah Sari, hamtakas adin, first of all, hamtakas adin is to get rid of klipa, period, and not necessarily machshava zars, which it's like there's cosmic blockages that are now not allowing for the flow to come down, the shefa to come down. And in Torah Baal Shem, in Torah Chassidus, when he talks about klipa, when he talks about this idea, it's not cosmic. It's actually in your own consciousness. He's talking about your own machshavas. But it's interesting that the hamtakas adin in Torah Sari is always, there is a lot of hamtakas adin, a lot of sweetening din, a lot of kavanot that you're doing to mamtik dinim. But the way you're mamtik dinim, you're sweetening din in Torah Sari is through mechavan tifashemus. That's the process of mamtik dinim. In the Sefer Or Nerav, which is from the Ramak writes, It's a very short sefer. They writes about different ideas of Kabbalah and how important it is. And one of the things he writes about, which is very unusual, because in Kavanot Ari, in Sefer Ari, you'd find very little conversation about Machshavas Zaros. There's very little conversation about Machshavas Zaros. What do you do with Machshavas Zaros? You're having foreign thoughts while you're davening. There's very little conversation, and there is there's a few things that is mentioned that you should mechaven, but there's very little. And the reason there's very little, I think, very simply, because in the Toras Ari, your mind is such a state of overload with intention that either you're doing it or you're not doing it. So if you're not mechaven, then you have machshavas zaros. But you can't be mechaven and have machshavas zaros. It's like, when I'll give you an example. Let's say you're closing the deal of your lifetime. I don't know. Mirza Shanavon should have the deal of their lifetime. You're closing the deal of their lifetime, and I don't know what that means, but I can imagine what you can be. And you're not having any machshavas zaros, by the way. No, all you're thinking is about this deal. It's the biggest proof that you have self-control and that your mind actually knows how to control itself. Is because if something's really, really negated to you, something's really relevant to you, your mind is crystal clear. If you were in a big court case and you're about to lose everything you have, I promise you wouldn't have any machshavas zaros. Nothing. Zero. You'd be only thinking about the court case. So when you daven Shemona Esrei, the problem is that the seriousness is not as intense. So therefore we have. But this would be in the Toras Ari. But the Ramak writes that the way to get rid of machshavas zaros, he doesn't write it to get rid of it. He says when a person is bechaven, the shemus, that automatically erases all the negative thoughts. So it's like a process of like filling your mind and with certain or higher intentions, higher in shemus, and that automatically disappear. But in the Toras Chassidus, in the Baal Shem, it's a very hard space. You're not only davening from your head. I said before, the person that came to Rabbinim and said he's having a headache after he's davening, and Rabbinim says, you're doing the wrong thing. After davening, you have to have a heartache, but not a headache. Your heart should feel, open, but not your head should hurt. So, yeah. Yeah, something else. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it. Let's try to get through the material. Yeah, soon. Everyone's going to offer everyone's perspective, but let's just try to get through because we didn't even start yet. So this is the idea of trying to process this idea of focusing, whether your eyes open or your eye closed, and to really be focused. Okay, that's one concept of the idea of eyes open. The next thing is also you have the hands that are together, that you place your hands together. You keep your eyes closed. Again, not just intentionally. This is what you have to do. This is what occurs, and you stop. You're more in a state of stillness, and there's also this idea of, which is brought down in Shulchan Aruch very simply, that you should hold your feet together. That you should hold your feet together. It's a Gemara. There's a Gemara says like Malachim. The Yerushalmi says also like Kohen Gadol, like Ufim Gadol. The idea is to hold your feet together. Holding your feet together, the Rashba writes, is the idea of also like binding your right and left side, the Chesed and Gevurah, the Yitzhar and Yitzhar. This idea, the Sefer Kohanim says it's Chesed and Din, Chesed and Chesed and Gevurah. You're holding them together, so there's no Din that can come in between. But the basic idea is that you're holding your feet together, which represents the idea of the absence of movement. So just reading through the next piece. The next piece is we'll learn is from the Maral. So I mean that is Shulchan Aruch. I just want to show you what it says, but it's not so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The next piece is from the Maral. I don't know. It's very little small, but we're just going to read a little bit what the Maral says. So this is the Maral in the Siva Soilam, the Siva Avoida, Perek Vav. So the Maral says that what is the idea of holding your feet together? What's the concept of holding your feet together? So Omar, you see on the left column, Perek Vav. Omar tzarich shichav meraglav, ki hashvas haragolim raglaim moir al inyan zeh she'adam atzmei kilo eni yachol liful davar. The idea of holding your feet together represents the idea that you can't do anything, because ascholas hakol hem raglaim shemoichin beisam asher yitzayna sham la'ases ma she'yirtzeh. Because the feet is the thing that represents movement. Go down a little to the next piece on the left card. Valzal shetzarich shichav meraglav ki raglaim he spashas asme she spashas asme kilo yitz min ila. That the idea, and then he brings it also with the kohen. The idea of holding your feet together is like this: that there is there is a spashtus, there's an expansion of the person's self through a person's hands. So let's say I'm standing here and I can expand my wingspan, or I can expand, which means I'm doing things, right? But when I do things with my hands, I'm still in the same location. So I'm saying that from the location that I'm at, I can experience a type of expansion from this place. Feet movement represents I'm expanding outside my space. Okay? So what is your space? What is your space? So there's makom there's a certain place that Hashem carves out for you. Hashem says, I carved out for you a space. There's a space for you, which means even though Hashem is Mekayim Shalom, but Hashem Hashem carves out a space for you. In that space, that's a space that's within our Kadosh Baruch Hu space. It's my space within the greater space. So the Hu Mekayim Shalom carves out for every person their particular space. But then, and how do you relate to your space? Or that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that by the cell I come to a place, I carved out a space for you, which means I recognize that my space is contained within the greater space. There's a lashon of in the Yalkut, I think in Parshas Nasa, he says that the Balaveir says, someone that's a sinner says that Adavar Kashli Mi'oid Tenli Makim. Like it's very hard for me to live in your space. Give me another space. Tenli Makim. I need my own space. The own space is where I'm trying to detach myself from the original space. Feet. Now, normally feet is a healthy thing because you have to be mispashet, you have to be expansive. That's part of movement. But in Shemona Esrei, what the Maharal is saying is in Shemona Esrei we have to be in a state where there's an ilon al. That's the way he starts. With an ilon al, cause and effect, where the effect recognizes that we're only the effect of the original cause, and because we're only the effect of the original cause, our space becomes an awareness of our space. Becomes that our space is only the space of our Kadosh Baruch Hu. There's nowhere to go. The reason why, let's just say this is more on a psychological level, then understand it spiritually. The reason why people are always, can't sit still and need to constantly run from one thing to the next and run and jump and travel is because there's a certain level of uncomfortability with their own space. They don't feel comfortable in their own space, and they feel like, okay, if I went there or I did that and I did that thing, that experience, that's going to make me feel whole. That's some type of. But the origin of the problem is you don't have a deep rootedness in your own space. And if you had a deep rootedness in your own space, it doesn't mean that you're not going to travel. I'm not saying that's the point. But you will travel. Most people when they travel, just think about this for a second. I'm going to get into this whole thing. But most people when they travel, they leave their old self somewhere and then they travel to another place and they become like a different person. It could be extremes or it could be less extreme, but there's a certain sensation like now if I'm I don't know, I'm in the middle of Thailand, I'm not the same person that's living in Montebello. It's a different sort of my person. You lose yourself. That is because you don't have a strong makim. If you had a strong makim, wherever you would go with your full self. And that's a healthy way of going, right? So your fullness of I am the same person. These are my thoughts that I have here. These are the feelings that I have here. This is my level of frumkeit, etc. And you can use this on many Musa levels as well. This is the way I exist in my makim that I spend my full time. And when I out of my makim, I'm the same person. I just happen to be now in another place. But my ruchnius and my mindset and my thoughts are all the same. I'm the same person. That is the awareness that my makim is tied to Mekayim Shalom. Not a davar kashli ma'oid, let me run away to another makim, to another space. And by the way, there is no other space, but that's just the illusion that there's another space. So what the Maharal is saying, if we can translate this in different language, what the Maharal is saying is that when a person davens Shemona Esrei, the posture that a person is saying is that I'm here. There's nowhere to go. Not that I'm not physically going. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere else that I want to be besides here, right? And therefore, my feet stop working. There's no more hispashtus of my feet. There's no more a reason to go somewhere else. So this holding your feet together, if you just think about it, what am I doing? Like, I'm standing and I'm nitzav. I'm like very, Hashem nitzav olav. I'm grounded. I'm present. I'm whole. Nitzav melech. I'm like strong. That's the Amidah. That's what I'm standing, and I'm standing very much in my place, and I feel very rooted in this place, and I don't have to go anywhere. That's the idea of holding your feet. So this is another thing. So your feet, your hands, your shaking, your stillness. And then the other thing is that you have to do it b'chashoy. You have to do it quietly. So what is tefillah? Is tefillah lachash. Tefillah is done. Shemona says is done quietly, because quietly. So there's technical reasons why you daven Shemona Esrei quietly. The Gemara says brachas has to do with Miktane Emunah, because if you daven loudly, it shows that you're saying Hashem can't hear me. Or the Gemara says it has to do with you shouldn't daven loud, because if you're going to say Tachnun, someone else is going to hear you. Penitent, someone's going to hear you. You're going to be embarrassed. So there's the technical reasons of it, but really, the tefillas lachash is that everything becomes more quiet. Everything becomes more quiet. How do you know when a person is losing an argument? When they start screaming. That the more noise you're creating, the more commotion you're creating, probably the less what's kish kish kari. The Gemara says that an empty vessel makes a lot of noise. You put a coin in there. So as someone's making a lot of noise, it's probably there's nothing there. Nothing is something, but not enough. And the chashoy, when a person is daven Shemona Esrei, is that it should move directly. You should not have to. Again, it should flow to the place that you're silent. Now, if you want to scream like we said before, and you want to lift your hands, or you're drowning, whatever the image that you have from the Baal Shem or from the Magid or from the Pinchas Kartzer, that's all good. That's if it's done naturally. Like if naturally you're coming to the Shemona Esrei and all of a sudden you're like jumping around and screaming, okay, fine, whatever. That's your state. You can't. But if you're following the process of that, you're moving from one step into the next, and you're going from a very loud place to Kodesh HaKadoshim, to a very silent place. You're going from the Azara and from the Kodesh, where there's animals and there's gore and there's blood and there's music. Okay, I got that. That's like the beginning of the process of movement. But then slowly as you get there, it becomes quieter and quieter. Quieter inwardly and quieter outwardly. This is that's the lachash, the tefillas lachash. Here you have this lashon from the Alter Rebbe in Torah that lachin tefillah b'lachash b'chashoy, because it's Zaydah. It's beyond amshachet, it's beyond revealing and extending. And bittul b'metzias. This is like this is the Chassidus language. Bittul b'metzias is like this complete nullification of self of the separate I, not the nullification of I. There can be a nullification of I. Wherever you go, the I is there. But that's the tefillas lachash. Now in halacha, if you turn the page in halacha, practically in halacha, the Torah brings down, and this is the Shulchan Aruch rules this way. Torah Chaim brings down that according to the Gemara. According to our understanding of the Gemara means that tefillah lachash means that you have to l'shmiya, that you have to hear yourself davening, that you daven quietly. But the quietly means, but you hear yourself. You hear yourself. That you're hearing yourself davening. And the Torah brings down that there's a Tosefta sense maybe differently, but we rule according to the Gemara that you have to hear it. But if you look in the Zohar writes that the Zohar writes, Lo Yisrachel Barnash Lemishma Kala B'Tzeloisa Ela Letzala B'Lachash B'Kala D'Lo Yishtama. The Zohar clearly says, the Zohar says that when you daven Shemona Esrei, you should reach a point where you're davening with a voice, with a sound that you can't even hear the sound itself. If you look on the side, and the Tzitz Oiris is from the Chidah. The Chidah writes B'Shem Hashallah, on the name of Hashallah, Le'nemer Ela Kala Shelo Yishma Filo La'aznav. And that's the Chassidus also says, but that's the gear. So that's the version of the Zohar that we have to daven in a way that you can't even hear yourself. So when you're speaking loud, you're allowing other people to observe you. When you're speaking low, you're allowing yourself to observe yourself, and that is also not good. That's what the Zohar is saying. In other words, that's the oimik of the machlokes. That's the depth of the argument here. It's not just could you speak quieter or quieter. If you're davening and you're still hearing yourself davening, then you're still hearing yourself, right? If you're still hearing yourself, like we said, shapirta the les ayin, then you're not. You're still observing. There's an observer that's observing yourself hearing. If you could still hear yourself, so it's if you don't hear yourself, what I'm trying to say is like this. The Zohar says you should say Shemona Esrei, and you don't hear yourself completely. But there's an oimik to that. It doesn't just mean physically you shouldn't hear yourself. It's when you get to the place where you're not hearing yourself, then you're davening Shemona Esrei correctly. You follow? Whether you hear yourself or not, if you're hearing it, there's a physical experience that's happening. Either you're hearing yourself or you're not hearing yourself. But on an afshistika level, an inner level, if you're hearing yourself davening Shemona Esrei, forget about if you're watching yourself Shemona Esrei, which is a whole other problem. But if you're hearing yourself davening Shemona Esrei, even if you're hearing and you're just by yourself, you're just hearing yourself, that in itself is a self-awareness, is the self being aware of itself, and that's already a separation which you're not really experiencing the Shemona Esrei. So you're trying to get to the place where there's gonna be a total collapse of that, and you're not gonna even hear yourself. And there's a beautiful language from the Zohar, Parshas Truma. We'll just read a little bit of the shtickle Zohar. It's on the left column and the bottom lines. Begin the hadvay he shaited the matal to I'm sorry, the next Itar hay tzadik lischaber ba'asad itzich berachamim bechaviva becheda berusa. That the tzaddik is now going to daven in a state of with rachamim and chavivus and chedva and joy berusa with awakening. V'chol shayfen kulam mischabim b'tu'u v'chada, and everything becomes unified into one existence. Alim ba'alim, idlam b'tatoin. Him and the experience of davening, the higher worlds and lower worlds. Ubetzina kol nehirin. And the higher lights are all revealed, and it's revealed into and it's one chabur and this one b'hai tzadik tikar toiv, iman tzadik toiv, the lachabur kol b'chabur chada, kidein kolob lechisha. Therefore, he's when he's davening with no sound at all. Ela b'tata, there's no sounds above and there's no sounds below. B'nishikin derusa, in a place of perfect rusa of desire of nishikin, of the state of kissing. Which means that everything becomes silent. The whole world becomes silent when you daven Shemona Esrei. So the above, below, you with the outside, the inside, the up and the down, you're in a perfect state of yichud, and therefore you daven in this perfect state of unity.
Say the words with your mouth then?
Yes, you do. So the reason for that is okay. First, the bigger question you should ask, which we'll discuss maybe one day, is how could you? It's not shaykh. In other words, no. If you're mamish in that state, you just go into silence. So that's a good shaila. So there's a Torah from the Maggid we have to learn. It's a very complicated, but it's very important. I would say the simple answer, not how could you. How could you is not a big question, but why should you? Why should you? Like if I'm in the state of nishikin v'nishikin, so why does I say b'lechisha? There shouldn't be anything, no sound. Period. Why should I even talk it? So the oimik, the basic oimik is because the dibur is what's mamshech things. Dibur is bahilal b'nefesh chaya. Man became a living being. Is b'nefesh b'mala. We're defined by our creatures of speech. When we
I am talking.
No. Okay, what? Lavdafka. No, wait 1 second. I just said like this. The idea of speech is to be mamshech, to draw down the bracha that you're saying into the physical world. Then if you're going to daven in machshava, just with thoughts, then the tefillas and the skabel b'machshava, you're drawing it down into a spiritual world. In order to draw down into the physical world, you have to do something physical. So you have to speak. Now the question is, who am I? And the answer is that I'm just an instrument to bring that up. That's not a shaila. I'm not. It's not I as an individual I. It's I as now an instrument that is allowing for the Mshach of Elokus to come down to this world. Right. So that has to be drawn down into this world, and therefore I'm davening, and I have to speak it. The question is, how can I do it? Like technically, how do I actually get to that place? And the simple answer is, but I really, we should learn it inside one maybe next week. The real simple answer is that it's command the carbon nafshe. Like the Gemara says, the Yerushalmi, the Tosfos brings down also that a melech when he reached Moedim, he would bow on his own, like he would command the carbon nafshe. He was like he would given the cardinal Moedim, cardinal nafshe. He was like it was an automatic state. That so what happens is when I'll give you a muscle to this. Like, if you practice playing an instrument with a lot of intention for a longer period of time, at some point, you're going to make the same sounds without a conscious awareness that you're making those sounds. So what happens is, when you end up davening Shemona Esrei on that state, it's menafshikar. The words actually tumble out of your mouth. So they just come out of your mouth. This is the be'erach, something like that. That's be'erach how it has to happen. Because before, if it's still not happening, there's a word from Reb Tzaddik. Reb Tzaddik writes that if you're still observing yourself davening, then you're not davening. So if I'm still conscious of saying Hashem Sefal Setiftach, we're going to say this is Hashem Sefal Setiftach. This is a gewaldige. Be'ez Hashem will try. Okay, we'll try to start this. But in the Shemona Esrei, the Hashem Sefal Setiftach, Imam can talk a week about Hashem Sefal Setiftach. But we have to. That's the beginning of, because we added this little thing. Hashem Sefal Setiftach v'yagid l'chazech. What is this? Now we know the words mean Hashem Sefal Setiftach. Open my mouth and let me speak your praise. But why do we say this in the beginning of Shemona Esrei? What is this? How is this a transition piece that gets us there? Okay. So the truth is, what? No, so now we're looking at the second packet, actually. It's Chayei Sarah. It says Vayeir. What? We're finished with that one. So now, so Shir Beis. Shir Beis, yeah. So the first page. Yeah, the first page. Oh, okay. No, we're reading the first packet before. Okay. So we really have to talk about, but I guess we'll do this another time. We really have to, it's like technical. I don't know when we start learning Mamish, we have to forget Hashem Sefal Setiftach. We have to talk about how the Shemona Esrei is actually created, and why is it 18, and what's the 12 brachas in between, and how they're divided. It's like there's technicalities to understand what's happening here. I mean, everyone knows, very simply, right? There's the beginning is the first Shlachim, the 3 Shlachim, and then there's 12 as Bakashas, request, and the final one is Haidah. But in Bakashas itself, the Avudraham divides it into 2. There's 6 that are pratius, individual, that you're speaking about the individual. It's personal. And then it switches. This last 6 is about the collective. These are the collective. If you go even more ba'oimik, the Avudraham doesn't write this, but if you go more ba'oimik, you'll see that each group of 6 is subdivided, that the first 3 are requests for spiritual things, and the second 3 of the 6 are always requests for physical things. So the 12, 13 in total, split in half, 6 and 6, individual and collective, but the first 3 are like spiritual things, like Slach Lanu and Atachin Ladam Das, and then there's Veino Baruch Aleinu, which is very like physical things. You ask for Shiva Tenek Shena and Lamashinim and Al Tzadikim, which is Petachin, and then you talk about V'Shalai Mircha and Samach David, which is physical. So there's the collective. There's divided 6 and 6, which is first I daven for the Yechid, for the Yachid, for the individual, then I daven for the collective of all Klal Yisrael, and within the 6 itself, it's divided 3 and 3. That's a very simple way of describing Shemona Esrei. And then there's 18. We'll talk about the 18 and why it's 18. And then there was the 19th with Shmuel HaKatan added, Rav Gamliel Agadol added the V'lam Shidim. Okay, so the way you start Shemona Esrei is like this. The way you start Shemona Esrei is you take steps. You take 3 steps. Now, 3 steps backward, there's no source. There's no marker for 3 things. All of Klal Yisrael does this, or else you're like a strict brisker. Probably you don't, but everyone does this. You take 3 steps back. It's very practical because if you want to take 3 steps forward, you have to take 3 steps back. Okay, but technically you're davening in the middle of an open field. You can take, say, I don't know if you're not allowed to daven in an open field, but whatever. If you're davening in an open field that there's no people are going by and that's whatever, so you could daven. So you take 3 steps forward. Where's the marker? Where's the source of the 3 steps forward? The marker of the 3 steps forward is from the Chassidic Ashkenaz, which we're going to see is very important to this whole Shemona Esrei, which we talked about before. Remember the Chassidic Ashkenaz, the scholars, the Yehuda Chassid and Shalom Gemaisa from the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century in Germany. Very important to the whole Shemona Esrei because they're the first ones, like we spoke, I don't want to get into this already again, they're the first ones to take the Shemona Esrei as a canonical text. I don't know if you know what this word means, but canonical text means that it's that it can be read, that it's canonized, it's canonical, that it can be read like Torah Shabbat. In other words, that every letter is meduyik, every word is meduyik. It's very the exact numbers of letters are very important. The structures of the letters are important. Why it's phrased this way and not that way is exactly since it's created by the Anshe Knesset Agdola. That's who fashioned the Shemona Esrei. Anshe Knesset Agdola is a very mysterious group of people. We don't actually know anything about them, but they somehow existed between the second and the first and second base in Bigdash. Mordechai was part of Anshe Knesset Agdola. Shimon HaTzadik Mishyer Anshe Knesset Agdola, but other than that, we don't really know who these people were. But the Gemara says that from then there was Nevi'im, there was Chagis Char Malach, there was the final Nevi'im. So we're taking what they wrote, not just like a suggestion. Baruch Aleinu, okay, Baruch Aleinu. Like you say, Aleinu Baruch. I mean, you can say it back. No, Baruch Aleinu is exactly. It's meduyik. It's very precise, and every word is precise. And we're going to focus on the intention. How many letters are in the whole parsha, and how many words are in the thing. Everything's very meduyik. So the Chassidic Ashkenaz, Rebbe Lezer Gemeiser writes in their Keach that you should take 3 steps forward before you start the Shemona Esrei. The Rambam brings it down to Shulchan Aruch. And the reason 3 steps forward is because now it's like I'm consciously entering into this state. That's the Kavanot. Moving in general, so the Gemara says that that a person that has 2, let's say, shuls next to you, one is a little further, one is a little closer. So the Gemara says that if you walk to the further shul, right, you get a special merit, and you get schar licha b'yadei. You get the merit of walking. Further is like you get a merit for every step that you take. You're walking further. So those of you who walk further, you should know the schar lich biyadei, or your scooter, whatever. Yeah, the scooter, you get the schar scooter biyadei. So the Maral asks, how come you don't see this with, let's say, with an esrig, a lulav of an esrig? Let's say you have a lulav of an esrig, so you'll say schar lich biyadei. If you have an esrig that's 5 minutes away. Those days, people don't have esrog in their homes. You had an esrog by a friend that lives 5 minutes away. You have an esrog 20 minutes away. Let me walk 20 minutes away to get the esrog. How come you don't say that? So the Maral says because the whole idea of tefillah, Shemona Esrei, is an Amidah, is a walking. You're walking from. That's why you have to go shtei psachim when you're not allowed to daven in Shemona Esrei. You're not allowed to daven in a shul. You have to walk in a sheer shtei psachim, like literally like 8 feet, or at least wait at least how long it takes 8 feet before you start Shemona Esrei. Asher Eish V'Sechi, you sit first, because the whole idea of Shemona Esrei is that I'm getting out of my normative experiences of life and I'm entering into another state. So alicha is a very important process. The steps that you're taking in Shemona Esrei represents a movement that I'm moving towards the place of stillness. Now there are 3 steps. 3 steps. So first of all, before we get to the steps, when you're taking the steps backwards, if you do the steps backwards, which everyone does, the Ben Ish Chai says that you should look around the shul and you should see who you're davening with. I think it's a very nice minig. I like the minig a lot. I know it's a Svadish minig, but I'm telling you it's a nice minig. The Arizal brings the same thing in Priyatz Chaim. The Arizal says also he used to look back, but he has a whole other kavana, a very mystical kavana. Which could also mukhavan, but the nice kavanah from the Ben Ish Chai is that you should just see who. There's a tzibur. I'm davening with these people. These are the people I'm going to lift off with these people, right? I'm going to go together with them. Who am I davening with? And this is why Dari says that before a person's davens, you have to say Erein Makabel Mitzvah Shal After Chamocha. That you don't have to say it. You have to do it. You have to Makabel Mitzvah After Chamocha because you're saying together. We're going to do this together. And I need the Chalbonas also. You need all the characters in the Shemona Esrei. A tzibur is tzaddik bein v'rishayim. It's Rosh Tevis. All of them together. I'm not saying you're looking at a person in the Russia. I don't know. Maybe you're the Russia. Okay, but you're dominating together with everyone else, and you're mischaber to everyone else. You unify with everyone else. That's when you're walking back. When you're coming forward, a kavanah could be a very simple kavanah is that you're entering into Eretz Yisrael, into Yerushalayim, into the Beis Hamikdash. That's 3 steps. But what we said before, based on everything that we learned before, that there are 4 shlavim, there are 4 steps that you're taking, right? We said there's the davening Shachris is divided into 4 parts. Asiya, Yitzir, Bir, Atzilus, going from one state into the next. So you're starting off in Asiya, which is the lowest level, physicality. Then you're entering into the world of Yitzir, the first step. Then from Yitzir, you're going to Bria. That's the second step. And the third step is from Bria into Atzilus, right? So you're physically going, you're doing a physical stages as physically moving that you're going into that state. And if you want, you can add a simple kavanah, which is, I'm choosing to leave my place to go into Mekayim Shalom. That's really where I'm going. I'm going to the real place, but I'm choosing to leave my physical place. And I'm entering into, so I'm getting into the world of Yitzir, which is the world of emotions, which you spoke about, the world of Malachim. So Hashem, I want to feel you. The world of Bria, which you said is Kishma Zoyim Bria, which is Hashem, I want to know you. And Atzilus is Hashem, I want to be with you. That's simply, if you want to translate what those steps are, is that you're moving closer and closer, and you want to say, okay, I really want to be Mesiachad with you. That's what the idea of the Shemona Esrei is. That's the idea of the postures and moving into Shemona Esrei. What we do is we start off with this Hashem Sefasei Tiftach Ufi Yagitil Osachem. Why do we start with this Hashem Sefasei Tiftach? Really, the beginning of Shemona Esrei is with the word Aleph. Aleph Dal Nun Yud. Hashem. But it's a name that is connected to din. Simply, it's connected to constriction. Why? Because Aleph, if you take the Aleph out, you have din. Right? Very simply. So you have Dal Yud Nun, which is din. So it's the Aleph that's penetrating the din. That's the kavanah. And in this is going to be a huge arichis, a huge conversation by Dari. I'm saying it's huge, but it's a few lines, but it's huge. That there's going to be a long conversation of what are you actually doing? What are you actually doing? I don't know where to start here, so we're gonna go quickly. Just a few things, and then we're gonna get more Moimik next week. Go to the 3rd page, just to see where it's moving towards. This is on Likkutei Yikarim from the Magid, and he says like this. Immediately, when a person opens their mouth to say Hashem Sefasei Tiftach, you see it? It's the 3rd page. Listen to these words. When you say Hashem Sefasei Tiftach, the translation usually is Hashem Sefasei Tiftach. Hashem, open up my mouth and let me speak your praise. But who's speaking? I'm speaking. Hashem Sefasei Tiftach, says the Magid, and you see Dari, all the Mekubalim say this. Hashem Sefasei Tiftach means open my mouth and you say what you want to say. Hashem Sefasei Tiftach, open my mouth and the Shechina should speak through me. So there's Hashem Sefasei Tiftach is a Shechina mislabeshes boy. The Shechina becomes vested within the person. U'medaberes by kol hadiburim. That's why Sefasei Safa is 185, like the word Shechina. Even the Grosser has this kavanah. If you look in the Grosser, there's Hashem Sefasei Safa is Gemata Shechina. And this is from the Magid. But the idea is that when you're davening Shmonas, Hashem Sefasei Tiftach, you're saying that I am now an instrument for the Shechina. That's why we call the Sechazan Einenu, we can bring eventually. That the Shechina is going to rest on me. The Shechina is going to speak the words through me. I'm just an instrument through which the Shechina's presence is becoming revealed in his life. When a person has Taka Emunah that the Shechina is in the Beres, because we're the Avar Shechina. This is the language of the Magid. The Avar Shechina, we're the limbs of the Shechina. The Shechina's presence is Hashem's presence in this world. How is Hashem's presence in this world revealed? Us. Us, exactly. The Shekhinah's presence in the world. What's the temperature of the world? This in Tzaddik Ranachman says that if you want to know what's the madrega of the Shekhinah, if the Shekhinah is on a high level or low level in this world, you should go here. He says women, but it can be anybody. He says see what people are talking about in the street. Why? Because if you want to know what the Shekhinah's presence, what's the temperature or the level of the Shekhinah in the world, see what people talk about in the bars. Simple. Because that's what the Amoinam are talking about. If people are talking about sports, the Shekhinah is in the madrega of sports. People are talking about the Chudei Law, okay, that it's another conversation. I'm not talking about the intentional conversations that are people having. What's the casual conversation of the average guy in the street? That's the level of Shekhinah in the world. If the average person in the street is talking about something a little bit higher, that means the Shekhinah is elevated. And how does the Shekhinah become elevated? Who's the Avodah? We. If we're going to talk, we change our words, change the atmosphere. You talk holy words, you talk Dvar Shebekdusha. We actually it affects the world. It affects the cosmos. Everyone. There's. I don't know. There is. It's getting late, but there's. You know that there's something that's called a culture virus. You know this. You know this phenomenon. It's a very important understanding of this. You're familiar with this culture virus? That people catch a cold. You can get a virus. You can catch the culture by a virus. That's obviously not literal, but which means is that if certain people are doing a certain thing in a certain way, and that becomes the culture, other people all over the world are going to start doing the exact same thing. God forbid this happens with whatever. It happens in very intense cases, but there's a virus, which means that the world it's one system. It's one system. You say, okay, what's the difference? Me in my room, I'm thinking these thoughts. Oh, you in your room thinking the thoughts? You're going to affect everything. Now, if you have the critical mass of enough people thinking this thought, and there's a certain culture of this thing, then it becomes a virus, and everyone starts acting this way. Which means that we hold the tools of the presence of the Shekhinah in this world.
It's like the people that intend on it, or the people that don't even realize.
That's correct. No, but that's when Hashem wants to come down to this world, anyways. Something like Hashem wants to push something through. There's certain type of oil has to come into this world. So even if you're not they're gonna end up talking about. I'm talking about what's biyadenu. Biyadenu is that we have the koyach we're the Avar Shekhinah, we're the limbs of the Shekhinah. You know, it says about the Baal Shem that when Jacob Frank, I don't know if he is, but if you know who he is, when Jacob Frank became a Meshumad, the Baal Shem was crying. Baal Shem actually said that he told us that he died because of this. That's why he left this world. He was such a tsar. But what was the tsar? He said that Kolzman he wasn't a Meshumad. He was like a limb that was still a defected limb, a terrible limb, but it was still connected to the body. Once he was a Meshumad, the limb was cut off. The Aver was cut off. The Aver of the Shekhinah was that caused the Baal Shem tremendous pain because it was one less person to reveal Hashem's presence in this world, and a person that had a lot of power. Anyways, a lot of crazy power, but a lot of power. This is the Shekhinah. When you have this emunah that the Shekhinah is talking these words, tipal of yira. A person enters a place of yira. We said yira. What's yira? From the Shem Shmuel, yira is not the level. Is awe. It's the yud. The yud of yud kevavke is yira. It's shmira avoida avir. Remember we talked about this. That the highest level is yira. Yira is awe. In that state, just awestruck. And now Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is higher than the Shekhinah. Kadosh Baruch Hu is like the transcendent. Then the transcendent is Shoyer Etzloi, and there's a Yichud Kutzah B'Chei Shechinta. In your experience, in the way you're davening, the Shekhinah is coming through you, and you're speaking these words. So this is a very powerful entry point that you're required to enter, is Hashem Sefasei Tiftach. To get to Hashem Sefasei Tiftach. We'll do one Kavanot, and then we'll do one Kavanot from the page before this. Because it's this next week's parsha. It's close. Parsha's told us. Hashem Savayata Yitzvah Lashem Nonoich Chishtoim. You see the story? Sharp Sukkim. Noida kishem Adnai b'meluye hu gematria tov resh ayin aleph. Shem Hashem, Aleph Daled Nun Yud. If you fill out the letters, which means Aleph becomes Aleph Lamed Pei on your 11. Daled is Daled Lamed Tov, which is 434, etc. The total number would be 671, which is the word Vayetar. Tov Resh Ayin Aleph. That's 671. If you Gimel Ois is Tov Resh Ayin, the root letters, so you have Tov Resh Ayin and an Aleph. You have 671. So 670 is Tov Resh Ayin. The Tov Resh Ayin, Nimrazu Begimel Ois is Atar, Min Vayetar. The Resh Tov Resh Ayin, you don't need to be a big makubal to realize that Tov Resh Ayin is very harsh letters, all right? Tov, we just said before, Tov is Malchus, the end. It's Tov and Ra, right? So these are harsh dinim. Vayetar, the Gemara says that Vayetar is like, I'm not a farmer, but it's something that turns around, you stick in that thing and it turns around the wheat. So the Gemara says that, the Gemara Yavamas, the Gemara says Vayetar is that is a atar is this thing that switches, that turns around things. So the tzaddikim are mishapech from midas adin to midas arachman. They can change from din to rachman. This is atar. So min vayeter. Oid yesh b'ez yoisis vav yud min vayeter. So the atar is 670. Also has vav yud because vayeter. That's what it says. Vayeter Yitzchak. Vayeter Yitzchak. Yitzchak davened. He was misapech. He's trying to misapech din to rachman. Trying to change constriction into revelation. This is the beginning of Shemona Esrei. That's this blockage. What the blockages are? There's cosmic blockages. Not everyone's healthy. Not everyone's wealthy. Not everyone has nachas. There's people are going through hardship because the world is not perfect. There's spiritual blockage in this world, and then there's blockages within your own consciousness, which is machshavas zaros. So that we have to break through these blockages to daven, to bring down the shefa, to bring down the flow. So what's vayetar? Vayetar is vav yud. Atar, 671 plus a vav in a yud. What is a vav in a yud? So he remezes bo'is aleph shel Tov Resh Ayin aleph. Tov Resh Ayin aleph is 671 is aleph Tov Resh Ayin, like the name Adonai, right? The aleph that is mishapech the Tov Resh Ayin that switches over to Tov Resh Ayin, which also tar, by the way, which is a razor, which is that the idea it switches over the din to make it into aleph, to make it into something positive. Are you following? You. Slow? Almost? Okay. So Vayetar is like this. In the letter Aleph, how does an Aleph spelled? An Aleph is spelled with a Yud, Vav, Yud. Yud on top. It's shaped. Sorry, not spelled, yes. Aleph is shaped with a Yud on top, a Yud on the bottom, and a Vav in the middle. Okay? So when it says Vayetar, what does that re say? Vayetar is Vav Yud Atar. Now, Aleph Tov Resh Ayin is Shem Adnai b'Melui, right? That's the Shem Aleph Daled Nun Yud is 671. Missing the one is 670, which is Atar, because you're missing the one. But Vayetar is when Yitzchak is davening, he doesn't have the one, but he has the Vav and a Yud. What is he missing? The Yud. If he would have the Yud, he would have an Aleph. And then it wouldn't be Atar, it would be Atar. Atar is 671. That's what he's davening for. V'nimsa ki vav yud shel vayeter hu vav yud shel tal shel ois aleph. V'chasem menu yudi la. And what was the yudi la? What's the higher yud that he's missing? Say the mazel elyon. That's the mazel elyon. That's the highest level of mazel, which is the shefa, the source of all the blessings. Hashem b'sham nishachim boim abanim. This is where children come from. Bana chayim mazoyner la b'schus talim milsa ela b'mazil talim milsa. It comes from mazel. That's the mazel. The mazel, when it says, Chazal say that doesn't come from loy b'schus, it doesn't come from your own schus. It comes from mazel. What's mazel? That's the yud. It says so. V'yati Yitzchak in is Kavanot yud lo shemenim shachim boim abanim v'toil l'adam shu chasher abanim. It's an interesting kavanah that a person that has a chasher abanim, a person that has trouble having children, sheychavim b'tilasa b'kavanah zu. Yishmechavim on vayetar, that you draw down from the yud, from the place of the mazel to the place of the 670, which is tar, that it should be transformed to become an aleph, and that's why you bring bracha. L'chein l'noichach, therefore noichach nun chaf ches is 78, which is mazla. which is the same numeric value as 678 is Mazel, which is the Gimel Avias, which is 3 times 26. 3 times 26, that's why you dip the Challah 3 times, in Melech, Lechem, 678. That's the idea of 3 times Shem Havai. This is the Kavanot Ari. What the Arizal is saying in a very simple language, just like bring it down all the way down, in a very simple, try to at least some level of simplicity, is that there's a blockage. A person's a chashul ban, a person doesn't have children. Yitzchak is not having a child. There's something that's stuck. And he's stuck in the place of the 670, which is atar. He's stuck in the place of the where it's covered over, where it's concealment, and there's missing an aleph. He's almost getting the aleph. What he's trying to draw down is vayeter. When he's davening, he's trying to say, I almost have the aleph, but if I have the aleph, if I can be mamshech the aleph, then I'll draw down all the blessings. What's the aleph even here in this analogy is the yud, right? But in simple language, what he's saying is that if you're able to draw down the aleph into the experiences that you have, if I'm having some type of choshech in my life, whatever type of darkness I'm having in life, it's choshech bonim or parnasa or shalom bayis or whatever issues that I'm having, that there's a certain type of hastar, there's a certain constriction, there's a certain thing that is not moving and it's not moving correctly. What the Ari is saying is what you're really missing is the aleph. You have to draw down the aleph. That's why what the aleph is, what we'll discuss, what the aleph is. But you have to draw down the aleph. That's why when you start Shemon Esrei, the first opening of your mouth is going to say is aleph daled nun yud. You're saying there's din, there's constriction. But what I'm going to try to draw down in this whole process of Shemon Esrei is I'm going to try to draw down the aleph. Which means we'll we'll discuss. But in simple, you can imagine what the aleph is. Aluf Shalom. I mean, it's obviously Hashem in a very simple language. But there's but the Baal Shem has a whole beautiful way of like unpacking this idea where it's not just. I'll tell you the secret. I'll tell you already then. Aleph is ah. That's what it is. Ah. Ah. That's it. That's going to be the whole secret. He's going to talk and talk and talk, and the end he's going to say, you know what it is? If you can just say ah, everything opens up. Mamish like this. And Be'ez Hashem, we'll talk about it next week. Ah.